This is Eyewitness News Up Close with Bill Ritter.
It's one of the signs that summer is just about over. A new COVID vaccine and the flu vaccine just about on the market. So is this the time to take them or wait a little longer? It's a big debate. And is it a good idea to take them at the same time? We talked to an infectious disease expert. Plus, another sign summer's coming to an end. Schools are opening this week. Educating the kids of the future, perhaps there's nothing more important than that. So how is the New York City school system, the biggest in the country, planning to unveil the new school year? Lots of challenges, including the most controversial one, how to keep kids in class from paying attention to their smartphones instead of paying attention to their teachers. Our first guest, school's Chancellor, David Banks. And good morning, everyone, on this Labor Day weekend. I'm Bill Ritter, and welcome to Up Close. It is indeed the biggest debate in schools across the country. After warnings from health commissioners everywhere and an uber-strong warning from the Surgeon General, schools are now trying to figure out how to stop the addiction of kids staring into their phones instead of staring into their books. So what's in store for New York City schools? My colleague, Mike Marza, sat down with school's Chancellor, David Banks.
Chancellor, welcome back to Up Close. We appreciate your time.
My pleasure.
So I brought my number 2 pencil as we get ready for the school year. I want to think about this time because we all remember our back to school moments.
Sure.
I want to think about standing in front of PS 161 in Crown Heights, a young David Banks, getting ready to go in. When you think about your back to school moments, your first day of school, how does that frame what you think about now heading into a new school year being Chancellor?
You know, when I think about when I was a young man going to school, first of all, I loved school. And you settle back into your new normal, if you will. And I think that's what I hope for all the kids around New York City.
Of course, when we think back to the time that you were in school, even when I was in school, times have changed considerably. Yeah. And now we talk about all of the challenges that teachers face, families face, but particularly students face. Cell phone usage has become a big headline, especially lately, as other states, the California legislature this past week just passed a piece of legislation saying, come up with a plan. You got a couple of years, but come up with a plan on how we're going to do this. I know the mayor has talked about it. You've talked about it. How close are you to developing what to do about cell phones in New York City schools?
Cell phones, in my opinion, have no place in our schools. And there's a lot of research that talks about this. From a mental health standpoint, it's not been good. From a safety standpoint, it's not been good. And so we want to do something about this. As you heard the mayor talk about, you know, there may not be a full-on mandate just yet. But over the next couple of days, we're absolutely going to have something to say about cell phones in schools. And you'll hear that very shortly. But the cell phones, not a good thing to have in public schools as far as I'm concerned.
And just one more on the topic, because this is a complicated issue. It is a challenging issue.
Sure.
Parents want to be able to communicate with their students,
sure,
with their kids. But when you're in the classroom, it is distracting. It's distracting for adults. We know how distracting it could be. I have my 2 cell phones off camera, and if I hear it buzz, I'm thinking I want to grab it.
That's right.
So logistically, how are you weighing how to do what you're saying you want to do?
Yeah, no, and we've been looking at this now for quite some time. And the reality for us is that we've come to the conclusion that, you know, kids should be able to bring their phones with them because they need to maintain contact and communication with mom, dad, grandma on their way to school, as well as when they're heading home from school. Those are safety issues, and we treat those very seriously. But we do not see the real reason for having them during your English class and your math class when you're in the 7th grade. Not necessary. And in many ways, deeply distracting. Not just the normal things that kids do, but oftentimes their parents are texting them all throughout the day. Not helpful. And so those are the things that we're looking to address. We don't know that there's always a one size that fits all for a system this large. You know, we have over 78,000 classrooms across New York City.
Right.
It's the largest system in the nation by far. And so, but the teachers, the principals, and many of the students themselves, Mike, have told me major distraction, and we're going to be offering up some guidelines of support.
We'll look forward to that. Other big headlines we've followed the past couple of years is the influx of students from other countries, the migrant situation, bringing at least, 30,000 new students in.
Close to 40,000.
Close to 40,000 now. How are you dealing with that? How are you handling all of that? How many teachers have you brought in? How did you find the space?
Well, first of all, if you want to see New York City public schools at our best, you should see how we have dealt with this migrant, what I don't refer to as a crisis, but a challenge.
What is the biggest challenge in making sure that these students are acclimating properly to the structure of American education?
Well, I think the biggest challenge is ensuring, first of all, that we can kind of stabilize where they are. You know, a lot of them are coming in, they're winding up in temporary housing. And because of some of the rules that we have, they have to wind up leaving some of the places that they're in. And we're doing everything we can to be able to maintain their ability to stay in the school that they started in, which makes all the difference in the world. But it is a challenge, because if you've been in a temporary housing site in the Bronx, and now all of a sudden we found you a different housing in Queens, and you're in the 5th grade, not easy to keep coming back to the same school that you started at. So a lot of the kids are actually starting all over again. That makes it hard. That's a real challenge.
Looking at some of these test scores, I mean, math actually ticked up, and some positive news there.
Sure.
But reading was down slightly after the new initiative.
Yeah.
Maybe some growing pains at the beginning of the new system.
Sure.
But I kind of ask me, when you read some of these numbers, for instance, only 53% of children in grades 3 through 8 were proficient in math.
That's right.
49% showed proficiency in reading. It just seems like half of the kids are being left behind. That is a huge challenge.
Mike, it is the biggest challenge that the system faces, and these challenges have existed for decades now. And I think it's just outrageous. But I don't blame the teachers. We've not been giving the teachers the proper blueprint on how to do this work. And you would assume, yeah, if you're a teacher and you're working, we should be able to teach the kids how to read and teach them basic math.
Right.
But you have to have the right blueprint to do that. And teachers were given the wrong blueprint over the last couple of decades. We haven't rolled out the reading program for the entire school system yet. We just did half of the school districts last year. This September, the other half roll out. So now the whole city is in.
Trying to keep good teachers, great teachers. How much of a struggle is that, and how much does that play a part in your overall plan to continue to see progress?
Teacher retention is absolutely critical. If you can't maintain the teachers, the investments that you're making in their professional development, their training, how well they're developing as teachers, if they're all turning around and leaving after a year or two, then you're starting all over again. So teacher retention is essential for the overarching success of our system. And we do a really good job in New York City.
Let's talk about where we're at right now. This is in the library of one of the newest building. This is MS 644 in the High Bridge section of the Bronx.
Yes.
It has that new school smell. It's all shiny, and it's awaiting a lot of excitement here as kids come into the middle school process here. How do you weigh the differences of facilities across the system?
Listen, I was a principal for 11 years, and I was the founding principal of 2 different schools. And I opened up 2 brand new buildings during my tenure as principal. There's nothing more exciting than to be able to walk into a brand new facility and be able to welcome in new sets of families and kids from the community. It's tremendously exciting. But at the same time, there are schools that have been around for over 100 years. And some of those buildings are absolutely phenomenal.
Some are cramped. Some don't have libraries. They don't have the types of amenities I think a modern new school like we see here at MS 644 would have.
Sure.
Those are challenges.
Yeah, got over 1,400 buildings. And they require a lot of uptake and maintenance.
Physical space, and then also fitting the kids in the space. Let's talk about class sizes, because there was a mandate to reduce class size in at least 20% of the schools from now until 2028.
Sure.
K through 3rd grade capped at 20 students, 4th through 8th grade capped at 23, and then high school at 25. Where are you in that process?
Right.
And how are you achieving those goals?
We feel good about it so far, right? So we were given 5 years for full-on implementation. Our first year, we were fine. Going now into our second year, we've already met the mark in terms of where we're supposed to be for year 2. So very hopeful about where we are. As we go into years 3, 4, and 5, that's where the challenges will escalate, because the way the law is actually written will require us to hire thousands more teachers and to open up thousands more classrooms, new facilities at a pace that currently we do not have all the resources that would be needed for us to do that.
Well, to your point, the mandate is 10 to 12,000 more teachers at a cost of $1.4 to $1.9 billion. And it mentions at least 500 additional schools. How do you find them? I mean, some people would say a budget of $40 billion, certainly the money would be there. But you live the realities of it. It is a large system. How do you find the money to make sure that this is going to come true?
We're going to need help. Quite frankly, we're going to need help from the state.
What is one thing that you tried that you maybe were less successful than you had hoped?
Great question. It's almost everything, right? Because all the things that we've done have been about how do we meet the needs of our parents and how do we make sure that what they are looking for this system to deliver for them, we're able to deliver.
Let's fast forward to next summer. At the end of this school year, when you look back, what needs to happen for you to say, that was a successful year?
There are a number of things that would need to happen. I absolutely want to see our scores go up in reading and math. Math continues to climb up, but I really want to see our reading begin to take hold, and I would hold myself accountable for that.
Do you have number thresholds that you would match with that? Or
I don't know so much number thresholds just yet because, some of this depends upon how the state assesses. Sometimes the state, it varies what cut scores they will use to even determine what the proficiency rates are for reading. So sometimes these things are a little complicated.
All right, finally, you are a product of New York City schools. And so I want to take you back where we started all of this.
Yeah.
Right at the doorstep of PS 161 at Crown Heights. What would you tell that little boy, knowing what you know now as chancellor of the system?
Right. I would say, first of all, just don't be disappointed that you're not going to maintain that afro that you had when you were in the 4th and 5th grade. It doesn't stick around forever.
Cue the picture.
Exactly. But I would say that you are going to experience, David, an amazing journey where your calling was to give back, to help other young people achieve their hopes and their dreams. And there's no better way to live your life than that. And that is the life that awaits young David Banks. And I'm here to testify.
Well, your passion, you wear it on your sleeve. Good luck, sir.
I appreciate you, man.
Thanks for making time.
All right. Thank you.
What a fascinating discussion with the school's chancellor. By the way, Mike Mars is anchoring our Back to School Town Hall on Eyewitness News. You can watch it streaming live on Wednesday, September 4th, 5 p.m. I appreciate all the work that went into all this. From education, we turn now to keeping us healthy with a focus on what the upcoming fall means for us health-wise. Because as the wisest of us know all too well, the fall is all about vaccines, from the flu to the latest COVID vaccine, which is about to be released, by the way. Joining us this morning, Dr. David Hirschwerk, the medical director of North Shore University Hospital and an infectious disease specialist. Doctor, thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
So let's get right to it. I'd like to start with COVID and flu and see what it looks like, but just COVID first. This is, if my calculations are right, this is the 5th summer of COVID, right? 5th summer. We should be used to this by now.
Yeah, started in 2020 and here we are.
Yeah.
And, we've had a bunch of cases that have occurred this past summer.
And we have done it as well in our shop at ABC. There have been a lot of people do it. And yet all I hear people talking about, or stories that we hear about, are that the people aren't taking tests anymore. So how do you even know if you have COVID?
Yeah, I think that it has become the case that people are not testing as much. People generally have flu-like illness and they can have fevers and cough and runny nose. It still can be hard to distinguish whether somebody has COVID or another respiratory illness. During the summer months, influenza tends to be less likely, And so more often than not, people have had COVID when they have those types of symptoms. But as we move further into the fall, into the winter, it will be hard to distinguish whether somebody has influenza or whether they have COVID or another virus.
So let's get into the vaccine question. How important are these vaccines? There are a lot of people who would say, well, I want to wait till it's sort of underway and it'll be more effective. Is that true, or should we just get it quickly? Because I know the new CDC rules are saying that starting next month, we're going to get a new vaccine.
Yeah, we are. And I think part of it is that it is hard to predict when rates will rise in the community. So people can get it as soon as it becomes available, so sometime in September or October. Part of it might also depend upon whether somebody has recently had COVID. So if you are somebody who has had COVID over the last few months, you generally remain protected to some extent for about 3 months after having become infected, and you would want to wait roughly that much time before you go ahead and get the COVID vaccine. But for everybody else, it is fine to really start getting it when it becomes available, September, October.
Get them together, the flu and COVID? Is that okay?
Yeah. It is okay. You can get both the influenza vaccine and the COVID vaccine at the same time. Some people do wish to wait a little bit longer before getting the influenza vaccine and get them sometime in November, but it really can be difficult to predict when there will be a rise of influenza in the community. And since it does take a few weeks after getting vaccinated to develop protection, it has benefits to get it early.
All right, finally, doctor, a question for you. I read an article this last week. It was really fascinating, the New York Times. This is not a post-COVID world. It's a post-crisis world, meaning that we're going to have this here for a long time. How serious can it be for people over 65? I know. You got to get the vaccine because it really can be very bad and dangerous otherwise.
Yeah, it's recommended to get it. It is beneficial. The benefit of both the COVID vaccine and the influenza vaccine really is to reduce the risk of getting those illnesses, but really most importantly, it's to reduce the risk of getting severe illness, reduce the risk of hospitalization, and reduce the risk of dying from COVID, which is still something that can occur, but mostly in elderly and in immunocompromised individuals.
Dr. David Hirschwerk, once again, doctor, thank you for joining us and appreciate all your insights into that. I think it helped a lot of people. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Happy holiday. Coming up, Dr. Ruth, less than 2 months after her death, a book that she wrote will be released this week. The woman who revolutionized honesty about sex, now revolutionizing honesty about loneliness. Welcome back to Up Close. On Tuesday, a new book goes public that just maybe will shine a new and profound light on fighting one of the medical and mental maladies of our time. We're talking about loneliness. What, you might ask? All the social media we have and loneliness is rampant? Yep, that's the truth. It really is. But you don't have to hear it from me. The amazing Dr. Ruth Westheimer, who led a revolution over honesty in sex, is now tackling honesty about loneliness. It was her last project, despite her 96 years and her suffering a stroke. She wrote a book in the past year, and she died just after she finished it less than 2 months ago. One of the people helping her write the book, Allison Gilbert, a longtime journalist. She joined me on the Up Close set. You were with the New York Times doing a story about her and what she wanted to do for the state of New York.
Yes, she was on a quest in the summer of 2023 and before to be appointed New York State's ambassador to loneliness.
By the governor.
By the governor.
And she made it known she wanted this job.
She wanted it, which is very unusual. This is very Dr. Ruth. Yeah. She had chutzpah in spades. You don't normally go knocking on the governor's door being asked appoint me. But this is Dr. Ruth, and she knew she had something to bring to the table. She had experienced loneliness throughout her entire life, and she knew she could help.
Because when she was a Holocaust survivor and her family put her on a bus for young people injured, all the way to Switzerland.
Yes,
and she lived there for a while. Yes. She was heartbroken and lonely because she never saw her family again.
She was an orphan. Yeah. From the age of 10 and a half on, She never saw her parents again. She never saw her grandparents again. So she went through the rest of her life piecing back family by choice,
86.
selecting friends to fill that gap. It was a remarkable journey.
And so 85 years later,
Yes.
85 years later, she meets you.
Yes.
And you do this story for the New York Times.
The luckiest journalist on earth to get that assignment.
She loves the story. I thought it was a brilliant story you wrote on her and about loneliness and how it is the next step, about learning about sex. That's what she was. And now all of a sudden you're lonely. So it's all connected to being a better human and living life.
Relationships, right? Bonds.
And so she says, I want you to do my book. Help me write this book.
Well, it's funny, only after the story published. So she was happy with how the story went, apparently. And we just doubled down on our beginning of a relationship. We were really at an arm's length during the reporting, as most reporters and subjects are. Right. I tried to maintain my composure. I'm not a celebrity correspondent. So when I met her, I was in a bit of awe of her, but I was on an assignment, so I had to interview her and kind of keep that formal distance. But once this story came out in November of 2023, and once she had the appointment, then there was the question was, what am I going to do with this position? I am 95. There's so much that I can offer. And it was in those conversations that this idea for the book bubbled up.
I'm going to jump ahead here,
okay?
Because you spent a year doing this.
Less than a year.
And the book,
yes.
But the book, she died
yes.
in early summer.
Yes.
The book was getting published.
Yes.
Now it's being published, and you were in this 1.5-year cycle with her, and you weren't friends with her before, and you were close comrades after that. What an experience for you. Before we get into the weeds of this,
yeah.
What an amazing experience. You were just so close to her and into the deepest parts of her psyche.
Listen, like most New Yorkers, I grew up listening to Dr. Ruth as a fan before I was a collaborator. I was a teenager listening to Sexually Speaking on my radio in my bedroom, so low that my mother wouldn't hear because it seemed so naughty and the words were so dirty. And so she was in my world my entire life, but I never met her. And then I met her, and she has this power to make you feel seen. Yeah. Her secret sauce was her ability to connect, to look at you and make you feel valued, like you belong. The best question she would always ask me, that I will never forget, that made me feel so special at the end of every visit: when will I see you again? And in that one question,
yes, we can.
In that one
her
question,
life is in that question.
In that one question, you are communicating to another human being that they are important enough to schedule time. It's not just, okay, see you later. That is, if there was one lesson from the joy of connections that I would love people to take away, ask your friend, ask your relative, ask your coworker, when can I see you again? And then you know what? Get out your calendars and make that date.
It's so her too. When I think of that, I think of the fact that she was a Holocaust survivor and she came this close to not being.
Yeah.
Her parents died. She never saw her grandmother again. All this, and so you hang on to that.
Yeah.
And it becomes more important than ever.
But what's so interesting, if you ask Dr. Ruth about her childhood, the years prior to what we're just describing, she would say she had the best 10 years any girl could have. She had an idyllic childhood. And from that, which is the power of parenting, right? The power of growing up in a nurturing community, the power of all of us to take care of our neighbors, she felt that she had what she needed to move forward.
So this book is if we came up with a quick answer for what is the purpose of the book, what would you say?
It is part biography of stories of Dr. Ruth you've never heard, but with the goal of helping you make deeper, richer, and maintain better, more fulfilling relationships like she did.
And a reminder, my honor to host the discussion about Dr. Ruth's new book with Allison Gilbert and Pierre Lehu this Wednesday, 7 p.m. at the New York Library in Midtown Manhattan. And we'll be right back. And that's going to do it for this edition of Up Close. Tiempo with Joe Torres is next. If you missed any of today's programs, no worries. I'm going to post today's segments on my Facebook page tomorrow. And by the way, you can watch the show on our new podcast. Yeah, we have hit the big time on any of our ABC7 NY platforms. Thank you for watching. I'm Bill Ritter, and for all of us here at Channel 7 Eyewitness News, we wish you health and peace. And let's take care of each other.